President Buhari tasks armed forces and security services on effective collaboration for sustainable peace and stability.
So we've been encouraged to continue with the tempo so as to see that insurgency is greatly eliminated from the country.
Vice President Yemi Osinbajo flags off national campaign to end open defecation by 2025.
Senate receives requests for consideration and passage of 6 aviation sector reform bills.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall discuss homegrown solutions to Nigeria's security challenges.
For many decades, Nigeria has been plagued with several security challenges, both from within and outside the country. The truth is that the development of a country cannot be successful in an insecure atmosphere.
That's right, Kirian. And apart from the obvious security issues we're all familiar with, such as the Boko Haram insurgency, which the military is reported to have crushed to a large extent, there is also the farmers' herders crisis, widespread kidnapping for ransom, armed robbery, and banditry. Indeed, Nigeria's security challenges can be said to also include election and political violence.
Very true, Kingsley. You know, in the past, the elders say some of the crises faced by communities in the country were traditional in nature and were mostly tackled with local solutions. Even though some of the crises today are still traditional, some experts are thinking that the security situation in Nigeria these days are fueled by outside influences and not just homegrown alone. Now, how easy will it be to find local solutions to externally induced challenges? Surely that requires partnership with affected countries as well.
That aside, Kyria, now security institutions in the country have, of course, the crucial mandate of protecting Nigerians from both internal and external aggression. And with the combined efforts of the nation's security agencies, the rate of insecurity in different parts of the country has been reduced to an extent, even as many lives have been lost to otherwise preventable security challenges. And
you also know that many countries have been where Nigeria is presently. For instance, after developing a local strategy, China has successfully eliminated the Uyghur separatist movement insurgency in the country. That is after they were labeled terrorists by the UN and, of course, the US. Now, experts are believing that the Chinese government's most substantive engagement with neighboring Afghanistan lately has been in order to control in border control efforts, designed to prevent terrorists from coming into China. And Kingsley, what's about to play out, between Nigeria and other neighboring countries with respect to the closure of our border appears to be a kind of a collaboration to have a force, a border security force, by the 3 or 4 countries concerned.
Well, we do hope that works out. There have been agreements in the past, but unfortunately those agreements we observed more in the breach. And we just saw the inflow of all kinds of persons and contraband items into Nigeria, including, of course, small arms and light weapons. But the Chinese example to which you referred to earlier is one of the reasons, most probably, that President Buhari has repeatedly proposed homegrown solutions to Nigeria's own problems and challenges. And maybe after carefully studying how different countries have addressed their own issues, confronted them using local strategies, Nigeria may as well find a way of doing the same.
Yes, the Sultan of Sokoto, Alhaji Saad Abubakar, while speaking at a town hall meeting recently, also harped on the need to develop homegrown solutions to the security challenges facing the country with the hope of finding a lasting solution to the crisis.
Now, even as experts agree that due to the peculiar nature of the country, with her diverse cultures, traditions, and ethnic groups, she may not successfully transplant security strategies from other countries. But that doesn't mean that, for instance, surveillance technology cannot be useful for border protection, as you mentioned a while ago, Kirian, even as intelligence gathering has proven important in identifying and neutralizing perceived threats that the country daily faces.
Now, is there need for reform of Nigeria's security architecture? Will a change in Nigeria's security arrangement lead to a reduction in the security challenges? And what kind of homegrown solutions can we adopt to meet Nigeria's security challenges?
Well, security experts will be joining us in the course of the program later on to enlighten us more on these questions that you have raised. It's on that note, we'd like to welcome you to this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. We are, as always, broadcasting live from our Abuja headquarters studios on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
And I'm Kirian Umayo. Thank you for joining us once again. And as usual, we shall bring you complimentary segments, which will include newspaper review, business, and others. For now, let's join Claire Adelabu Abdurazak to serve us the morning news. Hello, Claire.
Hello, Kingsley and Kieran. Just to add to what Kingsley said earlier on about the possibility of the meeting succeeding, I'd just like to add that it will be the first time that the three neighboring countries will come together at the ECOWAS level to deliberate on issues of trans-border insecurity issues. So there is hope that this time things might change. But let's begin the news also on security matters. And the armed forces and other security services have been tasked to collaborate more effectively towards sustaining the prevailing peace and stability across the country for sustainable growth and development of the economy. Now, President Muhammad Buhari threw the challenge while presiding over a strategic meeting of the nation's Security Council.
So we've been encouraged to continue with the tempo so as to see that insurgency is greatly eliminated from the country, and then the politicians and the hunters that have been working with us and other stakeholders, we've been encouraged to work more closely with such group of people so as to have the information that we require, so as to have the support that we require in order to defeat any form of criminality in the country.
And towards Agenda 2030, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo has flagged off Clean Nigeria, Use the Toilet, a national campaign to end open defecation in Nigeria by the year 2025. Now, at the event in Abuja, the Vice President reiterated the resolve that for the federal government support to state governments in this regard will be based on their commitment to implementing the National Wash Action Plan in their respective states.
It is a primary responsibility of state governments to provide water, sanitation, and hygiene services. But the federal government remains committed to supporting the states. Every state initiative will receive as much federal government support as possible so that we can provide all of these services to the Nigerian people.
And on to legislative matters now. President Muhammadu Buhari has written to the Senate requesting the consideration and passage of 6 aviation sector reform bills. A National Assembly correspondent, Ignatius Nku, also reports that the legislators have passed through the second reading of the 3rd Public Procurement Act Amendment Bill.
While I trust that these bills will be expeditiously and favorably considered by the Senate, please accept, Mr. Senate President, the assurances of my highest consideration.
And the House of Representatives has passed a resolution to investigate non-combatant helicopter and aircraft crashes belonging to the Nigeria Air Force. The issue was raised under matters of urgent public importance, along with that of the NDDC.
So today, more than 13 months after the time required by law, the Commission is yet to submit an estimate of its expenditure and income for the year 2019, thereby grossly failing to comply with the above statutory provision.
An expenditure profile of just 1 year.
may not be able to unveil to us exactly what has happened in the agency.
And the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture has announced the postponement of the 2019 Abuja Carnival. The ministry apologized to all invited guests for any inconvenience the postponement might have caused. A new date is expected to be announced for the carnival later. And as part of its determination to successfully implement Nigeria's correctional policies, the federal government is to organize a summit which will bring together modalities from key players on the process. Minister of Justice and Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, announced this in Abuja.
The prison reform and decongestion exercise has evolved a lot of policies that have now proven to be beneficial.
And the Nigerian Army is advocating that non-kinetic activities in the northeast Nigeria be strengthened to rapidly end the decade-long insurgency in the region. This was highlighted by the representative of the Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, while receiving a delegation from the Institute of Security Studies, Regional Office for West Africa, Sahel and Lake Chad Basin on a working visit to the Army headquarters here in Abuja. The Army Chief notes that identifying logistics supply routes and channels of funding terrorism in the Lake Chad Basin is critical to the ongoing counter-insurgency operations and promised to collaborate with the Institute to conduct researches on terrorism.
Your research.
And those are the headlines we are tracking for now. Join us again at 10 for a greater package. But don't go away. Kingsley and Kieran will be right back after this break.
The new edition of TV Guide is out, exclusively taking a look at the traditional television and new media. Are they comparable or complementary? Media industry players give perspective on the trends, progress, challenges, and the way forward. Find out on this compelling edition of TV Guide. Expository interviews with stars of the team within our space. Becky Madujemo of NTA, Utibe Umore of AIT, Nifemi Oguntai of TVC, and a host of others. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, also feature Iya Medina.
I'm the CEO, Managing Director of Iya Medina Sister Restaurant. I choose to serve. Shut up your mouth. Let me finish.
A TV drama series on NTA. Let's get to meet the characters behind Iya Medina. This edition also presents exciting features on tourism, culture, entertainment, sports, health, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendors near you or any NTA station nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
This year, like every other year, for over a decade, we celebrate and reward African creatives around the world at the African Academy Awards ZAFA 2019 in Abuja, Nigeria. The second homecoming event is a 3-day gathering of industry stakeholders and enthusiasts to network as well as encourage and motivate budding talents. The movie screenings, exhibitions, and masterclasses will hold at the Silverbird Galleria on the 22nd to 23rd November 2019. The awards and gala night on the 24th of November 2019 at the prestigious Transcorp Hilton Hotel Abuja. For inquiries and sponsorship, advert placements, and tickets, call the following numbers on your screen now or visit www.zafa.org.
This is wonderful.
I'm super excited about this. Nothing is expected of them other than awesomeness.
ZAFA 2019. Come expecting the unexpected.
Ha! Not so fast. Look, I'm tired. I want to check out of this country for greener pastures.
Just calm down for a moment. Please sit down. Do you have a job where you're going to?
No, but someone is arranging,
Listen, Aliko. Checking out of this country without proper planning means one thing. Unimaginable begin. I've been in the diaspora, but legitimately doing great things at home and abroad. As I've been saying, without the proper footing abroad, the risk is not worth it. Listen, Alinko, it's better to be home and be trapped abroad, or even end up in prison.
They swore an oath to serve our fatherland and defend the people. They traded their freedom, comfortable homes, and mortgaged their lives on the battleground for our unity and peaceful living. These are the great, fearless, loyal, and committed Nigerian armed forces who risked their lives courageously to safeguard our borders. But in the line of duty, many never returned. Nigerians, arise, let's celebrate our fallen heroes. Put on the remembrance emblem with pride to support the incapacitated and families of our fallen heroes.
It is indeed befitting to honor the memory of the gallant hearts of the men who paid the supreme sacrifice to keep the country united.
President Muhammadu Buhari enjoins all ministries, parastatals, religious and corporate bodies to donate generously to the Emblem Appeal Launch. Send your donations to these accounts. Account name, Emblem Appeal Launch. Account number 393-200-7526. EcoBank Nigeria PLC.
Now it's time for us to take some business stories with the Corporate Affairs Commission holding a one-day training program for heads of companies and their senior management team to discuss issues relating to the Companies and Allied Matters Act and how the new amendment affects them. Let's join our correspondent, Chumobi Watanaji, for details of the stories.
With the 2019 Companies and Allied Matters Act Amendment Bill passed by the 8th National Assembly and awaiting presidential assent, regulatory issues and compliance has become a topic of discourse at various fora. The bill seeks to establish an efficient means of regulating businesses, minimize the compliance burden of small and medium enterprises, enhance transparency and shareholder engagement, and promote a friendly business climate in Nigeria. This meeting also focuses on corporate governance issues.
Oh, definitely. We hope to achieve better compliance to the Companies and Allied Matters Act. And of course, to the issue of corporate governance, the way the company itself is governed. Because these are the people who, on a daily basis, see to the workings of the company.
Engagements such as this, the CAC says, will be held once every quarter to cement the relationship between the regulatory body and companies operating in Nigeria to ensure improvements in ease of doing business and attract investors into the country. Meanwhile, some Nigerians trained in Japan on different agricultural produce and modern methods of farming for improved yield are engaging the Train the Trainer initiative to improve the capacity of beans farmers in the country on the management and handling of post-harvest losses to reduce the cases of low yield among beans farmers in the country.
To strengthen the bilateral agreement between Nigeria and Japan, help the needy society, strengthen Nigeria's economy by applying the knowledge members gain while in training in Japan in doing their work.
So if you find yourself here, whatever knowledge you have, when you go back to your community, please try and disseminate this same information to other farmers that are at home.
It is important for us to look for other ways of preserving or protecting our beans at growth and at storage.
And on the capital market, here is a quick review of the closing figures of trading on the floor of the exchange. With business news, I'm Chimubi Walter Naji.
Well, many thanks to Chimubi for that package. Now, next is newspaper review.
right, Kieran and I will go through the 4 papers that we have this morning, as Bayate is, of course, not with us today, and indeed won't be available for the rest of the week. Kieran.
All right, now let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust newspaper, that's from top to bottom. Now, skinning the donkey to extinction as dealers pay the price. It's on pages 8 and 9. Now, fake policemen disrupted Bayelsa Kogi polls, says the IGP. Donkey Sanctuary holds conference in Abuja tomorrow. Okay, now the lead story this morning on Daily Trust newspaper is Buhari, 1 trillion naira wasted on constituency projects in 10 years. Amount, that's a rider, or 2 riders to that. Amount could finance Abuja, Lagos roads and others. 300 MDAs inflate projects by 18.624 billion naira. And if you look at the graphic illustration on the Daily Trust, you find an analysis done here on the left-hand side of the screen, where the Lagos to Ibadan Expressway costing 134 billion. Kano Expressway to Abuja costing 155 billion. And of course, Mambila Hydro Project, 200 billion. Second Niger Bridge, 220 billion. The argument here is that 1 trillion naira can take care of all those projects.
Yeah, that's right. Kieran will return to discuss some of those headlines later on in the course of the program. Let's take a look at the very busy front page of the Daily Independent newspaper. Above the nameplate of Daily Independent, Fulani community files suit. 650 billion naira compensation over killed cows. That's on page 5. 2 die as PDP and APC supporters clash in Kogi. That's page 5 as well. And DSS, that is Department of State Services, insists on proper documentation of sureties for Showore's release. Says its officials have received death threats. Again, that's on page 5. Now, the lead story comes with a kicker. P&ID, $9.6 billion award. Nigeria faces November 25 deadline to pay British court $200 million. And Nigeria, of course, sacks UK legal representatives for a second time. Details can be found on page 4. Now, sacked Benue rep refuses to quit house. Attends committee meeting as Speaker swears in replacement. That's page 5. Why don't you get a sergeant at arms to a victim from the meeting, even though his presence at the meeting would be of no value? I mean, if you've been removed and your replacement has already been sworn in, if at the very moment you were removed, that was the very moment you should have packed his private items out of his office and then left the premises.
And his reappearance, in the house actually did not speak good of him.
Absolutely, absolutely. But it's also the role of the sergeant at arms. Exactly. If you said he attended the committee meeting, there was a chairman of that committee meeting. The chairman, once he cited him and knew that he wasn't supposed to be present at that meeting, should have called the sergeant at arms to evict him from the meeting room. Police arrest 2 local arms manufacturers in Enugu. That's page 11. Nigerians pay tributes to late Henry Boyo, renowned economist. That's a sad one there. Henry Boyo was a very prolific writer on economic issues. He maintained a column in a number of newspapers, including the Daily Independent, and I think the Punch as well as Vanguard. Henry Boyo passed away on Monday, but it's so rest in peace. Details on page 2. Now, second list story on the paper, just below the photograph there. Now, the photograph there is very significant, Kirian. Let's read the caption. The photograph on the front page of the Daily Independent says, Josephine Ugo, staff of the Federal Airports Authority of Nigeria, and award recipient. That's on the left. President Muhammadu Buhari, second left. Now, Bashir Abubakar, Assistant Comptroller, Customs Service, another awardee, second right. And Professor Owason, Chairman ICPC, during a national summit on diminishing corruption in the public sector at the State House Conference Center, Abuja, on Tuesday. Now, the awardees, the stories are very interesting. The lady to the left, Josephine Ugu, of course, had returned monies she found. She was a cleaner at the airport, and she had found monies over a period of time And I think one of the amounts was said to have been about $12 million or so, which didn't belong to her. And then she returned to the authorities, who were then able to trace who the owners, rightful owners of those monies were. So she has her due reward now on the national stage on account of the ceremony that took place yesterday at State House. Now, the customs officer there, who's an assistant controller, was said to have also been offered a bribe to clear a bribe of about $142,000 in order for him to clear 40 containers laden with tramadol. He declined. And you know what evil tramadol has been doing to our young ones all around the country.
What is worrisome about this is why should Nigerians continue to trade on that? You know, with all the health issues, you know, to that, because of course in the past we've known that government has placed ban on that, and some Nigerians are still keen on doing the business, right? And on the lady issue, of course she did a good thing, right? You know, but my thinking too is, who would carry such an amount of money to the airport? Doesn't that amount to money laundering? If that huge amount can be, you know, tracked at the airport.
Well, that's right. That's an obvious thing for the financial intelligence agencies to follow up on. But it is the value. Yeah. In these two persons, the lady in the first instance, exactly. She could have said, "Oh, look, I'm a cleaner. You know, the Lord has answered my prayer now. You know, this is the way my prayer is answered. I will no longer be in poverty. I will take this money and do whatever I like with it."
Maybe it was a looted money, and they eventually.
Precisely the same thing with the customs officer. He might as well have looked the other way, collected over almost $140,000 and said, "Look, let the trucks go." But of course, you never can tell whoever will consume the tramadol, and when the persons get stoned on those substances, who the next victims just might be. Exactly. All right, so I take this last one, Kirian, and I'll return to you. That's on the right at the foot of the front page of the Daily Independent. Bayelsa governorship poll. Dixon tenders video evidence of electoral fraud and violence. Accuses army of colluding with APC to rig poll. Fake police responsible for violence and ballot snatching. That's according to Inspector General of Police. Says 11 persons so far arrested in Bayelsa and Kogi. And rigging of Kogi and Bayelsa polls can't stand, PDP insists. And court nullifies promotion of Ajimobi's 21 crown obas. Page 43.
All right, to Daily Sun newspaper, Daily Sun on the right-hand side of the nameplate. Ex-Ghanaian president appeals to federal government to reopen borders, promises to intervene in the closure of Nigerians' shops in Ghana. That's a very interesting story, Kingsley. That's on page 39. Yes. And the lead story on Daily Sun is Buhari hits National Assembly, accuses lawmakers of squandering 1 trillion in 10 years. Mandates ICPC to go after contractors and collaborators in government. That story is on page 6. Now, election riggers risk 3 years jail term. Senate moves to criminalize forceful declaration of election result. That's on page 6. Saure still mobilizing for revolution, says the DSS. And below that, Bayelsa Global Dixon releases video evidence to prove electoral fraud. Says results shouldn't be linked to feud with Jonathan. INEC to present certificate of return to Elian tomorrow. And at the bottom, Imo, Ihedioha, Floss, Okorocha, Uzodima, others at appeal court. The story is on page 41. Kingsley, this issue of ex-Ghanaian appealing to Nigeria to reopen borders, promising to assist in the issue of Nigerians' shops closed down in Ghana. Why has he waited this long to do that? Because the issue of a closure of Nigerian borders and the maltreatment of Nigerians in Ghana has been there for years now. So why is he reacting now?
Well, I mean, the former president of Ghana, John Mahama, is a statesman. Obviously, without necessarily speaking for him, you would imagine that he's weighing in now because the other formal institutions and officials and agencies of the respective governments have also been making their own contributions to see how the issue of the border closure can be resolved. But two issues that you have raised, that's one with regard to why the late entry in terms of lending his voice to appeals for the border reopening. But he also said something, that the border closure was hurting ECOWAS, Now, if it's hurting ECOWAS, what is Nigeria's own interest? Nigeria's own interest is that our economy has virtually been wrecked, as it were, by smuggling activities, not just of contraband, but in particular of arms and light weapons that have found their ways, into our economy. That our economy has suffered the most.
Exactly.
Yeah, ours is the largest economy on the African continent by GDP size. So, if Nigerian economy is suffering, obviously, it will be the same for the rest of the ECOWAS countries.
And again, the president of Nigerian Traders Association, who was also hosted one of our platforms, did say that, look, even what Nigeria did is not even against the ECOWAS protocol. It is in line with the tenets of ECOWAS protocol. He explained that in details, because you can't be running us down while we are maintaining the ECOWAS protocol for your own benefit alone, while we are suffering. It's not just the goods, the banned commodities or items that are being brought in, but the issue is that of light weapons that cross the borders at will.
That's right.
From through the sea, land, borders, and this affects, of course, the issue of kidnapping, which has been there for a while, and they don't do kidnapping without a regular supply of arms. And I remember, on one occasion when we did a program on kidnapping, I made mention of somebody that I know that was a victim.
Yeah, that's right.
He said while he was there, they started discussing about supply of arms that same night. He said that what astonished him was the same night those arms came in inside the bush. So there is usually a process of
that's supply chain.
Supply chain, exactly.
Supply chain. And then the issue of Nigerian traders being harassed in Ghana, I think Nigerians would appreciate it if former President John Mahama could also take that issue up with Ghanaian traders. It is a traders association that are now engaging in tit for tat, as it were, against Nigerian traders. Nigerian traders have not found it easy in recent years in Ghana, and we do hope that the measures that have been contemplated will be respected by all our neighbors. Now, Kira, in the absence of any other story, this story on the Bayelsa governorship election says Dixon tenders video evidence of electoral fraud and violence. Where did he tender? Is he already at the tribunal?
He had a press conference yesterday also. Right, but one striking one again, Kingsley. This 1 trillion naira wasted on constituency projects. We've had programs on issue of constituency projects in Nigeria, where we have cited that, look, in every state we have local government, and we have also those who represent local government. Now, you are at the federal level. Some people are at the state level. Now, if constituency projects should be done from the federal level, what happens to those who are closer to the people who should benefit from those projects, like the councillors, the local government chairman, and what have you?
Well, that's true. I mean, it turns out that the purpose of constituency projects has not been fully realized. I mean, it's a creature, as it were, of the Fourth Republic. It came under the administration of President Olusegun Obasanjo, and the whole idea was to have dividends of democracy cascade to the constituency. You have it for state houses of assembly. You also have it at the national level. But it turns out that, for the most part, constituency projects are just deemed to be a gravy train, for the initiators of those programs. And as the president has already directed the ICPC, they should continue to dig deeper.
Exactly.
So part of the abandoned projects that we find all around the country will be these constituency projects. There was an app that was launched sometime last year. It was by Other Paper, Other Paper Initiative. It's called Construct. It is to enable persons, you can download the app and then track the constituency projects that are ongoing in some of the pilot states that were indicated. Okay, so let's take a look at our editorial this morning. It's coming from Blueprint newspaper, and it's towards achieving a good toilet habit. Now, the editorial in part reads that yesterday the global community marked the 2019 World Toilet Day, and the World Toilet Organization, founded by Jack Slim in 2001, declared November 19 every year as a day to deepen and sustain global interest in the way and manner the call of nature is answered. The editorial starts also, poor sanitation habit is peculiar to developing countries like Nigeria, where poverty and ignorance hold sway. Open defecation is a common sight in both rural and urban centers in our country. So the blueprint suggests that in addition to the measures the government is putting in place to eradicate the unhygienic practice, provision of mobile toilets should also be considered with minimum payment charged.
Now, on Monday, Kingsley, we had the Honorable Minister of Water Resources on this matter, and a lot of issues, were raised. Well, he talked about open defecation being a culture. It's predominantly, noted in the northwest, zone of the country. But we made it clear to him as well that it's not just a culture in that part of the country, but down east, it's always been there. And some people are even being more acculturated to that, right? Because the measures that we've seen so far in the past did not work. Kingsley, in 2014, when it became an issue at the World Water Week in Stockholm, the issue is, what should governments of developing countries do? For instance, in Abuja, we don't have public toilets in Abuja, for instance. Not to talk of the states or local government areas. And of course, such practice is predominantly, carried out in the hinterland, where the bushes are available for it. And some enjoy it. Some feel, look, it's good to do that.
Yeah, it's disgusting, yes. It's disgusting, and there's no question about that. But my concern, part of the story we read in our news bulletin this morning with our colleague Claire, is that they want to end open defecation by the year 2025. How realistic is that? That's about 6 years from now. For that to work, you need, public water supply, where every house is having its own borehole and seeking its own borehole. Where are you then going to have public toilets that this will be useful? And how many of the households that you have in deprived neighborhoods where people will have access to water? I always cite this as an example whenever we've had to discuss this issue. In the 1970s, the late Brigadier General Samuel Ogbemudia had issued a policy to say that by 1975 or thereabout, they were going to eliminate the use of pit latrines in Benin City, which meant, therefore, that you were going to have extended and expanded public supply of water, so that they will have the so-called water system. And it was already working towards that, but unfortunately that administration was overthrown in 1975, and as the saying goes, the rest is history. But the states and local governments will have a lot of responsibility in this regard.
You have always even mentioned the issue of sanitary inspectors that we used to have those days, that should be inspected. And when you talk about water, you have to have the toilet system, first of all, before water can come. And if you don't have that infrastructure, then water will not play any role.
Any role, that's true. There's no doubt about that. And of course, it's a very, very significant health issue, because those who work in the offices, those from whom you buy things on the roadside, those from whom you buy items in the market, you have to ask yourself, what is the level of their personal hygiene? All right. So,
on this note, to conclude.
Bishop review and return tomorrow. So we'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll deal with our issue of security.
20 years of travel and counting. 20 years of promoting tourism in Africa and diaspora. Over 3 million kilometers traveled. Over 30 African countries visited. Explored the diaspora in 4 continents. Connected over 100,000 happy tourists to Africa. Reached over 50 million homes. Igniting smiles across Africa and beyond. As Gogi Africa turns 20, we thank you and invite you to join us in the quest for 20 must-visit destinations in partnership with the largest TV network in Africa, the NTA, Ministry of Information and Culture, Ministry of Transportation, Lagos State Government, Canon, Delta Airlines, Royal Caribbean, Tour Brokers International. You too can still be a partner. Call the numbers on your screen or info@gogeafrica.tv. Goge Africa, celebrating 2 decades of heritage, travel and tourism.
If you just joined us, this is Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the NTA. Now we have a very big issue on our hand this morning for conversation, and to set the tone for it, let's have our colleague Abdul Malik, who is going to be throwing more light on the issue of homegrown security for these solutions.
The average Nigerian is consumed with issues of safety and security. Due to the civil unrest by Boko Haram insurgency, farmers' herders clashes, kidnapping for ransom, militancy, and other forms of insurgency in the country. Recently, President Muhammadu Buhari, at the 25th Nigerian Economic Summit, called on both the public and private sector stakeholders to look inward and prefer homegrown solutions to the unique challenges confronting the country's socio-economic development. This, analysts agree, is a right step in the right direction, as the carrion call by Mr. President has challenged experts in the public and private sector in the country to meet for this national assignment, as most of the socio-economic challenges in the country cannot be solved by external bodies unfamiliar with the country's terrain. The President bemoaned the concentration of wealth in the hands of a few individuals at the expense of ordinary Nigerians, adding that the development had contributed to the current insecurity bedeviling the country. Experts say Nigeria requires targeted reforms, tough decisions, as well as a radical shift in the current culture, particularly attitude towards vigilance, taxes, and public finance to fix the economy, which can consequently fix the security issues. With agitation for community policing, interagency intelligence sharing, and proper funding of the police and other security agencies, experts say will keep Nigeria on track for sustained peace, inclusive, and prosperity-driven growth. How can Nigeria's security architecture be redesigned to meet current challenges? Are state parties and security agencies ready to come together for deliberation on solutions to Nigerian security challenges? What is the way forward in stemming the tide of insecurity in Nigeria? These are questions guests on Good Morning Nigeria who prefer solutions to.
Thank you very much, Abdul Malik Adio, for that background. With us here in the studios and also from our Lagos Network Center, our regular security analyst. First, we'd like to welcome Felix Ogbuado, is a retired Assistant Inspector General of Police and also a lawyer. Retired AIG, pleasure to have with us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thanks so much for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right. Also here with us in the studios, security consultant Kabiru Adamu. Kabir, delighted to have you with us in the studios this morning.
Good morning, Kingsley. It's a pleasure of mine.
And of course, we have Mike Ejiofor, former Director, Department of State Services. It's also good to have you here this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigeria.
And from our Lagos studio is retired Captain Aliu Omar. He's a security expert. Captain Omar, it's good to have you on our show this morning.
Thank you.
All right. Gentlemen, I mean, let's see, you listened perhaps to the banter between my colleague and I when we were introducing to this program, and of course the background there by our correspondent. We have a sense of what the security issues are, and we also see what the responses have been. But some persons will say that, you know, it's like you are mopping the floor. In the meantime, the faucet of the tap is turned on, and the more you mop, the more water you have to contend with. What do you see? Let's start off from that point as the key security issues, and how well is the current architecture responding to this? Let's begin with retired AIG Felix Ogbuado.
Well, thank you very much. We must accept the fact that Nigeria as a nation for now is contending with very serious security challenges. No doubt about that. Maybe if we start by going backwards, where we were many years back when it wasn't like this, to where we are today. The question is, how did we get to where we are today? And the answers are not far-fetched. One, the security agencies have not been able to meet up with the challenges confronting them as of today. But beyond the security circle, let us address some of the other issues that are rearing their heads for now. One, we are contending with the issue of population explosion right now as we talk, as we speak. Then secondly, that goes also with the issue of unemployment. A lot of young Nigerians are unemployed, and like the saying goes, the idle man is the devil's workshop. So these are some of the issues we need to address. Then back to the issue of security operatives. In terms of strength, manpower, for instance, we take the police for instance, the strength is grossly inadequate for this country. United Nations recommended ratio is 1 police officer to 400 Nigerians. If you take the population of the strength of Nigeria police force today is well far away from that. And in terms of the empowerment too, empowering them to meet all these challenges is not there like we used to have it in the past. I recall when I joined the force, 1976, after my youth service, that was some 43 years ago, things were not like this. Most of the police, virtually every police station had everything needed to tackle security challenges. Although I also accept the fact too that the population was not anywhere near what we have today. The challenges were not anywhere near what we have today. As at that time, there was no cultism, no insurgency, no armed robbery to this extent. We just had a few cases of maybe murder and all of that, stealing and all of that. But today, there's a kind of conflagration. So we really need to re-energize the security outfits to be able to meet up with the challenges.
I think you actually hit it in the head, because of our population, considering what happened in your days and now. Not only that, we're also grown in terms of the application of technology, which is also facilitating some criminal activities. All right, now let's turn to Mike. So you've been part of this security system in Nigeria, and I take it that you have the implicit knowledge of how the architecture works. Now, is the security architecture being overwhelmed by the level of criminality that we have in the country at the moment? And how would you assess, the effort of the security system to grapple with the level of criminality that we're witnessing today in Nigeria?
Yeah, I must start by saying that our security agencies are not overwhelmed, but are ill-equipped to face the current security challenges. Reasons are obvious, like Mr. Ubaudu said. The challenges we had those days, immediately after the war, were virtually armed robbery and sundry offenses or crimes. But what we have now, we're not only contending with insurgency in the northeast, terrorism, which is a global crime, we're also contending with internal crimes, like kidnapping. But worst of it all, the source of our greatest challenge. That's why when you started this program, I talk of homegrown solutions to our challenges, security challenges. More than 50% of our security challenges are politically generated by politicians. And that is why I also feel that at that level, we must evolve some kind of homegrown solutions to tackling such challenges, because they are within us, made in Nigeria, and must be solved by Nigerians. In the issue of insurgency, yes, we can apply technology and all what have you, but like I said, it's not that our security challenge, our agencies are overwhelmed, but they are not equipped. And I continue to emphasize that We are politicizing our security architecture, and that shouldn't be. If we must make progress, then we must sanitize our security architecture by equipping them, training, take care of their welfare, and from there, the people can be motivated to work. But as it is now, we are not taking our security challenges seriously because, one, the primary purpose of government is provision of welfare and security of the people. Are we doing that at all levels, local government, be state, and federal? We must take these security challenges very seriously. And I'm worried because as we approach the festive period of Christmas or the end of the year, crimes tend to rise because people also want to engage and in activities that will yield money. So we are going to face more security challenges as we approach the end of the year.
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Let's bring in Kabir now. What are your opening thoughts on this very interesting but unfortunately challenging issue?
I would like to have an eagle-eye view of the whole issues. And by that, start with, let's even ask ourselves, what is this proverbial word, security architecture? We use it a lot, but I think we need to ask ourselves, what is it and why are we challenged by it? We have the tendency of looking at the security agencies as the security architecture. Unfortunately, that is a mistake. The security architecture is a combination of strategies, policies, and plans for securing a nation's lives and properties, as it were, as well as how you structure the institutions, as well as certain bodies for projecting your national interest. Now, inherent in that is how do you fund, how do you evaluate, and how do you grow those institutions within the security architecture. Now, given the time at our disposal, I would like to say part of the challenge that we have with the current security architecture is a reflection of our history, the colonial history, and then unfortunately the military legacy that we have. The current national security strategy, as it were, projects two things, which is threat and warfare for the protection of lives and property in the country. Unfortunately, given the democratic institutions that we have, that particular projection of threat and warfare does not go well with our democracy. The reason is this: the ordinary Nigerian, you and I, wants to see the police and the military as protecting our life. Now, when they project that threat and warfare, they scare us away, which means, unfortunately, the community will not be supporting them with the information they desire. And inherent in that is the problem we have. The second challenge, I mentioned funding and sourcing for the institutions. We've talked extensively around the number of personnel in all of these agencies. The UN recommends, if I'm right, about 450 police to, citizens to one police. Currently, we have about 370 thereabout police officers. Given that number, the appropriate number of policemen that we have should range in about almost 500,000. And then if you look at the deployment of the police itself, you find out that most of them are not deployed for the policing function that they are supposed to do. They are deployed for other aspects of their activities. Now, why am I mentioning this? In evaluation that comes under the national security architecture, as it were, is completely missing under the current system that we have. The second one, which is also very important, is coordination. There are about 4 bodies currently that play that coordination role within the national security architecture as we have it. Number one is the Office of the National Security Advisor. By that name, advisor, that means that coordination element is actually an advisory role. So if he gives the advice, it is not a must for the people he's advising to actually follow. So you have situations where certain persons go to the other 3 coordination elements within the national security architecture. That is the presidency, as an example, and then sometimes the Ministry of Interior. And to an extent, even the Police Service Commission has that role. And then the State Council also has that to an extent in terms of public order. So you have, I would say, a convoluted system where the coordination element within the national security architecture is actually missing. There are a lot of issues that come under that, because if we look at America after 9/11, that is one of the biggest gaps that they noticed. There was no coordination, no synergy between their various agencies. So they set up the Homeland Security Department to deal with that. Now, the good news for us is that currently the Office of the National Security Advisor is revising the current national security strategy. And it may shock some of us that the first time we actually introduced one was in 2014. And now we're reviewing it. Some of the points made by my co-panelist will probably be subsumed under the current review of the national security strategy. But the danger is in all of that is this. Wherein comes the role of the legislature in the oversight function for the security agencies? Remember, I talked about evaluation in the national security architecture. Because of our military legacy, the legislature has not been playing that role. So I'm hoping that in this current revision, issues like that will be brought in. Of course, the judicial oversight is very important. Then even within the executive, there is need for that oversight. So it is when we look at all of this that we understand why we have the current challenges that we have in security as a country. We have, I'm sorry to say, a convoluted national security architecture that is not appropriate for our current democratic tenets. Perhaps in the course of the discussion of this program, we'll look at areas that would hopefully advance a homegrown solution to improving our national security architecture.
Certainly we are going to come back to you, because I've raised a very pertinent issues here that need a further analysis. In the course of the program, we will do that. But first, let's go to Lagos, where we have Captain Ali Umar. Captain Umar, you have listened to other guests, and let's get your opening thoughts on the matter.
Thank you. Good morning to the guests in the studio. Talking about a homegrown solution to Nigeria's security challenges, from my own purview, will first and foremost particularly address our homegrown problems. You see, we want homegrown solutions. Homegrown solutions to what? To homegrown problems, obviously. And when you look at the security situation in Nigeria, you cannot but begin to see it first in the grain, in detail, from the national security perspective. As one of the speakers there said, national security is no longer about external aggression and enemies and spies and what have you. Post-Cold War, national security has come to expand and involve certain things within the nation that can threaten the nation's security, as it were. So if we were to talk about homegrown problems, what are these homegrown problems for which solutions are required? I will take it on two sides, the problems and then who should spearhead these solutions. We tend to think about security when things happen from the gun and boots and soldier and policeman perspective. That is not where the real homegrown solution lies. So where are these homegrown solutions? We start with something like food security. If we agree that a hungry man is an angry man, then if you check the food security indices of this country, you should know that we are an angry people. And that in itself can bring about acts that come across as security threats. And what about education? If knowledge is power, then the indices of our education sector simply means we are a weak nation. What's the state of the education sector? Education security, key. And if health is wealth, then any nation whose health sector is not optimal is a poor nation, is a weak nation. I can go on and on. What about economic security? If our armed forces are not overwhelmed but are under-equipped, then it means economically we do not have that security status to fund them optimally. Economic security is key. So there is what you can call a mutuality of dependence between national security and these sub-security components I'm talking about. And until they are actually tended to, then as one of my presenters there said, it's like mopping the floor when you have water spilling. If you don't plug that place, you just continue to mop and mop and mop. And where is this homegrown solution going to come from? We have a husband and wife situation between the National Orientation Agency and the National Security Agency. Their imagination and innovation ability will come to test in putting together what will be considered a homegrown solution to these problems. Homegrown in the sense that in the last 11 years in the Northeast, we've seen all manner of foreign support, but the problem still thrives. The problem thrives because the support we're getting and the solutions were not crafted for the Northeast. They were crafted for wherever we're getting them from. We adopted without adapting. You can call it copy and paste if you like. That's not to say copying is bad, but we will copy, modify before we paste. So we have to adopt and then adapt. I say the NSA and the National Orientation Agency because, as my colleague said, the position of the National Security Advisor is advisory, but that's on the surface of it. If you really know who National Security Advisors are globally and should be, they are little seen, little heard, but really have the weight and the leverage to push certain policies through. Probably they are made advisory to check the excesses of what such powers could give them. Finally, when it comes to homegrown solutions, I want also to bring to fore one thing that our leaders should be able to grapple with sooner than late. We have no faith in us, and the worst offenders here are the politicians. We tend to think anything that is foreign is superior. But I want to assure you that no foreign security solution, not even the best security operative out there, can have the native ability levels of the lowliest and the most junior security operative in here. And until we begin to have a faith and confidence in these our own localized institutions and operatives, we won't solve our own problems. We just won't solve our own problems. If we begin to put confidence in our operatives, and by confidence I mean we put them on the spot and make sure they are on their toes, then you will see them grow to become what we run to out there for solutions. The only way, there is no other way. That's my opening take. Thank you.
All right, Captain Umar, thank you very much there for your opening salvo. And gentlemen, Kirian, I mean, it's clear that our guests are saying the same thing virtually, but their perspectives somewhat different, at the same time most useful to the essence of our conversation. I mean, you can take a look from what AIG Felix Ogbuadu earlier said. He was talking about population explosion, unemployment, tied that to what Mike Ejiofor also indicated, so it's politically generated security challenges, plus of course the theoretical perspective, very useful, brought in by Kabir Adamo in terms of trying to, if you like, unpack what the security architecture used as a metaphor should be, plus what Katouma has said in Lagos. I mean, all of these issues, in a sense, I mean, gentlemen, you're both lawyers here, you can relate them to Chapter 2 of our Constitution, the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state security. If you are looking for economic security, you're looking for health security, education security, food security, an issue we have also tackled on Good Morning Nigeria, all related to one, population explosion, that we're having a demographic crisis in Nigeria. But in spite of all of this, and before we get into say, look, we have all of these issues, still we have to talk about providing solutions to our security challenges. What have we seen in terms of response, either national or subnational response to these challenges? Do those who are in authority or indeed stakeholders recognize that these are the sources of the security challenges that we are all complaining about on a daily basis? So that when we have that
shall we say, national and subnational mindset, then it becomes a lot easier to begin to provide solutions and get the buy-in of those who are supposed to help foster this. AIG Ogbuadu.
Thank you very much. Let me start by saying that before I start talking about preferring solutions to internal security challenges, we need to identify the causes of those insecurity challenges. What are the causes? What are the causes? And like I've always said, one major error we make in this country is that we have failed to prioritize security. We have failed to prioritize security. Some of the mistakes we also make again is that a lot of people are getting paid so much for doing next to nothing, and security agencies, outfits are not adequately provided for. What do I mean by that again? We're in a nation where somebody has as many as 3, 4, 5 policemen attached to him alone. Rather than emphasize collective security, we're emphasizing individual security to the detriment of the majority of Nigerians. It's not the best. Like Jaffa said at that time, we need to, I don't want to key into some of these academic approaches to our security challenges. Because when you have security challenges, for instance, yes, we have an NSA, National Security Advisor. If there's crisis somewhere, it is the foot soldiers who get deployed. The security agencies, the police, the civil defense, and other outfits that can tackle such challenges. Then, having said that, let me talk about the empowerment of security agencies. They need to be given all the equipment, the security hardware, to combat security challenges. That is very lacking. Like I used to tell people, in those good old days in the Nigeria Police Force, virtually every police station had patrol vehicles, big trucks for mass movement and all of that. They had firearms, ammunitions were there, and the place was very well secured. And response time was minimal. But as today, all of that is history. If you go to most of the police stations now, the other time there was an incident in Ekiti State, herdsmen attacked a village, rampage, almost killed a lot of people, set the buildings on fire. The victims ran to the police station crying, asking for assistance, protection. The policemen said, look at, our vehicle is there, no petrol in the car, no petrol in the patrol vehicle, how do we go? These are not excuses. The government must wake up, like I said, prioritize security. Empowers all the security agencies to be able to combat crimes, no matter what, how they manifest. They must also be adequately motivated. We are tired of excuses and all of that. Once all of these are put in place, most of this and of course bring in technology, so that we don't just put all our eggs in one basket. Only the human approach to security and fighting insecurity. So these are the things. Then of course, we need to appeal to the political class. Look at what just happened, manifested in Kogi State and Bayelsa State, these last elections. Killings, some manner of untoward behavior in that place. Because it's politics of do or die. The level of desperation. A lot of people think that politics is the only source of income, the source of livelihood in this country. It's not. Politics is a game. It's like a game, sports. If somebody wins, it should be magnanimous enough to bring all of that, everybody on board. Once you win, you carry everybody along. The person who lost, you have the courage to congratulate his colleague who won. But I know Nigerians will come up with this question mark. Oh, the election was bad, a lot of my practice, blah, 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 blah. But we cannot continue that way for all these years. Since 1999 till date, this, how many years now? 20 years. We must change. Then, of course, we need to find a way of reorientating our youths. If it's possible to design a kind of, maybe a new subject or something in our curriculum, school curriculum, starting from the primary school up to secondary school level, to let these youths know that crime does not pay. To let them know that it takes so little or nothing to destroy, but so much to build. And that hard work pays. Hard work pays. And that there's no food for the idle man. And there's punishment for, serious sanctions, punishment for anybody who breaches any of these laws. So this enlightenment is there. But let us, like I said, let us start from the political class. Then take it on to the education sector. Bring National Orientation Agency. They need to do a lot more to reorientate the Nigerian citizenry.
Yeah,
so it's very, very important. It's very, very important. But lastly, before I round up on this leg, empower the security agencies, motivate them adequately, equip them, and let's also appreciate the fact that security is a collective responsibility. Collective responsibility. It's not something we leave to judge security agency alone. Information sharing is key. That's why I like the advert from NTA here. That when you see something, say something. And I've also added that advert. In addition, when you also hear something, say something. Not just only when you see it. When you hear something, say something. You see something, say something.
Yeah. Provided what you hear is not hearsay.
No, you see, say something. Investigation will prove whether it's yes or not. Yes. Okay? Like I was listening to the PDP candidate in Kogi State last election. He on his own declared himself the winner of the election. And also went on to say that 9 persons were killed or so. So I'm going to reach out to the police authorities, tell this former PDP candidate, let us have the names of all of these people that were killed.
All right.
If the names are not provided, and if we find out that those that were killed were just 3 or 4, and someone come out to say 9 of them, that kind of statement we should not encourage.
All right, gentlemen, what I've done this morning so far is what I would call a compendium of what the problems really are and the analysis that followed. We've had the academic aspect of it in trying to do the explanations of what architecture is and how it can be properly utilized. And you raised very, very important issues too with respect to equipping the police with both movable and immovable infrastructure and facilities that they need to fight crime in the society. And we are talking about crimes that we bred here, that were grown here, and that their approach has to be homegrown as well. And Captain Umar did capture it properly, you know, when he talked about the causes of the reasons why people engage in criminal activities. But we all know that some kidnappers and other criminal elements are graduates, some are doing business, good business, but this is just a matter of, look, it is my nature to do this, and they engage in that. So it must not necessarily be food security, health security, economic security, and what have you. I know many Nigerians will argue in that direction, because the people that are doing this are educated. They have a network that they sustain using a process that in fact has beaten the security architecture we're talking about. That is why we are talking about crimes all over the place. Now let me come back to Mike Ejiofor once again. Now, do you think there should be a reform or a restructure of the security system? Some persons have argued about having state police. Some have also talked about, maintaining both state police and federal police, as is obtained in America. Of course, have the ABI and, of course, the state police. So, should there be a reform to be able to address this issue of criminality, head on?
Yeah, you just preempted me, because one of the solutions I was trying to proffer. The current IG has been talking about community policing and all the intelligence-driven processes. Now, I have been an advocate of creation of state police, but the constitution has to be amended before we create it. But in the meantime, let us embark on this community policing by involving the community members in the security drive. Let them get involved, starting from the traditional rulers. We are looking for local solutions to our local problems. Like I said, more than 50% of our problems, security challenges, are politically generated. So they also need political solutions. Take, for instance, we all knew before the campaign, the last election in Kogi and Bayelsa State, how tension got up to hitting point. Everybody knew of it. Even a blind man saw that these problems were coming up. But what do they do? INEC summoned stakeholders, sign undertaking to be of good future. But what do they see thereafter? Because politics is not about service now. For me, I believe that politics is about service. But now, politics are about self-interest. Winner takes all. They make some inflammatory statements, our politicians. What about looking at the processes of candidates emerging? Today, we have court giving orders, counter orders, disqualifying candidates, and because the politicians have refused to play by the rules. And what does government do? Government is also not even helping matters. Government seems to be taking side with unpopular decisions, and this generates crisis. So as long as our politicians refuse to be patriotic, not playing by the rules, we'll continue to have more challenges. How many people were killed? Like Mr. Ogbaudu said, whether it is true that 9 people were killed or not, one life lost means a great deal to Nigerians. We should not lose lives because we are going into election. People justify shooting openly, and I have been a supporter of the current IG. But the statement he made, I wasn't happy about it. That people who were shooting were not policemen because policemen were identified. How many of them were arrested? And you encourage people to continue to perpetrate evil and crime on the society because there are no deterrents. You talk about politics. Now, I have said it times without number. Create electoral offenses tribunal. In ordinary crime like this in Nigeria, for instance, if you are convicted of a crime, you are banned from office for 10 years. You cannot hold public office for 10 years. But what do you see in Nigeria? Somebody stole a mandate. He disqualified, another person takes over government. He's not punished. He's not banned. So we need to look at our legislation too, like Kabiru said. Strengthen some of these measures that if you are ascended power through fraudulent means, you must be punished, at least for not holding office. But you didn't ascend power through the process, normal process, and the next election you are contesting again. So we need to have deterrence, strict imposition of punishment to our politicians to serve as deterrent to others.
All right, Mike, thank you very much. I would like to return to Kabiru Adamu. I would like you to drill further into the architectural metaphor that we have used in describing our security arrangements and operations. There are aspects that you raised earlier which needed further explanation. But take along the following. One, do the key political operatives and decision makers, national and subnational levels, have an appreciation of what you earlier described as convoluted national security architecture, and therefore what is required to fix it? That's the first point. The second point also relates to what we have seen over the years. The proliferation of security agencies. Yes, I mean, I note the point that the UN recommendation, as you said, 1 policeman to 400 or 450 Nigerians. But here we are. In recent years, we have seen the rise of paramilitary agencies. The civil defense, for instance, has come up. Out of the police force, DSS also grew. And then you have also vigilante self-help associations by private individuals, by communities, plus the fact that state governments have on their own created some pseudo-paramilitary entities, even though they are not armed. Some of them are useful for controlling traffic. Hisbah in Kano, for instance, undertakes clear security functions. So how do all of this fit into that architecture, as we use as a metaphor, and why is it that the problems continue to, as it were, proliferate?
Let me start from your first question. Do the political leaders recognize the potential and the assets that the national security architecture can be used in achieving our national interest? The answer is they should. Unfortunately, I'm not one, so I'm not able to say whether they do, but they should. And my reasons are clear. National summits have been held. The last one was under President Goodluck Jonathan. Before then, several were held, and reports were tendered. And I want to think white papers on some of them were actually developed. And so they were presented with the consequences of not, reflecting a homegrown solution to our security challenges. The second point, which is also very important, the protection of their positions, as it were, is dependent on the efficacy of the national security architecture. Inherent in that is the dilemma. Are they going to put forward the protection of that position, as it were, or is that position the national interest? Remember in my opening remarks I said we are challenged by our history. Unfortunately, because of the military legacy that we have, the protection of regimes, as it were, is one of the major tendencies of our national security architecture. So the leadership of certain security agencies realize that if they protect, as it were, the office of the presidency or the political party in power, then their seats would be secured, as against if they protect the national interest. Now, the second element of that is the funding related to security operations, as it were. We are all aware of the proverbial security vote. In my earlier discussions, I talked about evaluation of security roles. And my co-panelists have mentioned extensively, I've talked about the need for funding. Now, and I say this with all sense of responsibility, if we continue along the line of how we're going, there is no amount of money we'll put in the security agencies that will see the results that we want. And the simple reason is this: there is an absence of monitoring and evaluation functions within the current security architecture. So as the judiciary, the legislature, or even the executive, you are unable to account for the monies that are voted into security. So to change that and to make that money more effective, and even to take care of the equipment deficit within the security agencies, we need to introduce better monitoring and evaluation and auditing functions within the security agencies. There will be a lot of pushback, no doubt, because, I mean, it's a cash cow for a lot of people. But if we want to achieve the results that we want to achieve, we need to introduce enhanced auditing and then better monitoring and evaluation functions. Your second question?
My second question relates to, in the context of the current security architecture, we have seen a proliferation of paramilitary entities, state subnational entities, as well as resort to self-help through the evolution of vigilantes. And yet, the challenges are unremitting, yes.
It's the natural consequences of the failure of the national security architecture, as it were. The Constitution, the security architecture itself speaks about securing lives and property. But clearly, if you have a situation where currently you have about 2 million Nigerians displaced in the Northeast, and that's the most conservative figure out there, there are probably more than that. Come to the Northwest, go to some parts of the Southeast, you have a lot of displaced persons. I don't think we even have the statistics for that. So that tendency for communities, state governments to, evolve means of protecting themselves is very high. Now, the challenge is that the national security architecture in the first place should have taken that into consideration. What do I mean by that? The police should have, for instance, embraced these evolving agencies, vigilantes, as part of the policing functions. A good example is you use the Hisbah in Kano. There is nothing wrong with the police spearheading the Hisbah movement so that they can tap from the resources available there. We talked about the police being short-manned, short-staffed, as it were. So if you are short-staffed and you have that kind of available resources, why don't you use it? In criminology, it is recognized that you can train this type of self-help groups. Train them so that you teach them where their work starts and where it ends. Do they have the powers, for instance, to arrest? If they don't have, how do you regulate it as the police to ensure that they keep within the legality of their function? So within the current national security architecture, that is the gap, that coordination element that I spoke about earlier on, which can be played by the police itself, the National Security Advisor, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Interior. All of these groups, there's nothing we can do about them. As long as the national security architecture is not solving the challenge that is currently existing, then they will be evolving. But then what can we do? We can engage them so that they play within the legality, the constitutional role that perhaps they are allowed to play. Where they go beyond that, then we correct it. We can use Zamfara as a case point for how mismanaging these help groups can create security challenges. Part of the challenge why the banditry became what it became in Zamfara is because of a self-help group called Ensakai. What they did is they were a vigilante force. Over time, they started targeting a particular ethnic group. And because the targeting became very ferocious, that ethnic group sought arms to protect itself. Yes. And this is where we are today. In one instance, killed over 200 of that particular vigilante group. Until date, as we're talking there, we're trying to manage that problem. So we do have a problem in our hands because of the proliferation of these groups. The police is not yet engaging them and, teaching them how to remain within the constitutional rule that they are playing. So going forward, and I'm hoping in the current National Security Strategy Review by the Office of the National Security Advisor, that they will take this particular aspect into consideration. We've not talked...
Kira, I'm just wondering, sorry, I know that you are itching to ask a question. Look, I asked, you said, when I asked the question, do the political actors, national and state, have an appreciation of this theoretical perspective? I'm still curious about you said they should, but whether they do or not, I mean, you resile out of that by saying that you are not one of them. In your interactions with them, is there an appreciation, or they just say this as a matter of, cut and paste, or, just provide funds, get more policemen employed? Do they have this theoretical understanding? They don't have to be academics in the first instance.
No, they do. They do. And I can bet you from my interaction with some of them, they are having sleepless nights over the security challenges. However, there is a question of capacity, which we must admit. I mean, among ourselves here, we have God knows how many years of experience. I'm probably the youngest one, but I have almost about 30 years experience. So security is not something you wake up with. It's a discipline that is wide and that needs a lot of study and appreciation before you can execute it. Mike has hit the nail on the head when he said part of our challenge is the politicization of security. Now, how many of our political leaders actually have experts in security that are advising them? Very few. And even when you have that, I mean, it's on record that a former DG of the SS said that some politicians rely more on marabouts than on expert security advice. And that's the reality. I mean, under the former National Security Advisor, we knew how much was voted for intelligence, as it were, quote unquote, from marabouts. That's the reality in this country. So,
all right, thank you. We're going to come back to you certainly, before we round off this edition of the program. But you have raised very important issues here, and the proliferation of those self-help groups, as it were. In my community, we have one, and we are funding them. And what the problem is, according to you, is when do they stop? At what point will they stop? Will their powers end so the police can, take it on from there? But from all the indications, Nigeria is under-policed, which is exactly why we have all those self-help groups, rising. But let's get. I have my perspective on that. Okay, you will come with that much later. But let's go to Lagos, where we have Captain Umar. Captain Umar, of course, was so emphatic, in his opening remarks with respect to his take on the situation so far. But let me say this: the homegrown solution is meant for homegrown criminal activities. And that you earlier posited, that the approach for the Northeast security challenge is that of adoption without adapting. I'd like you to expatiate on that. And again, you who have played a role in the security system, being a retired captain, you are in a better position to give us an idea or a sense of what can be done to harness, the activities of one. We have the police, we have Air Force, we have Navy, we have the paramilitary, we also have the self-help groups, we call vigilante groups, which of course the military used a lot, in fighting insurgency in the Northeast successfully too. Now, what can be done to harness these agencies or groups, as an architecture that could lead to frontal attack to criminality in Nigeria, be it kidnapping, be it robbery, and other organized crimes?
Well, talking about crime in Nigeria, vis-a-vis a homegrown solution to check it, the first thing we can do, what I want to call low-hanging fruit, fast-track approach to stabilizing the situation, is deterrence. Right now, we have what you can call a nil consequences posture to crime. People do about anything and get away with it. Where we see a semblance of justice is drawn out, cumbersome, and lousy. That has to stop. We must understand something. The solutions we seek to the problems we have are within us. Within us in the sense that we caused the problems and we know best how to sort them out. Law enforcement agencies, intelligence agencies, and all those who actually grapple with crime will be funded, no doubt about it. They will be equipped, no doubt about it. But we must press for results. Strategic security management is still very lost when it comes to our security agencies. In fact, I'll be frank with you, our security agencies are allergic to numbers. And if you do not track anything, you cannot manage it. We must be able to ensure that we get cost-effective security measures by tracking results. This is very simple. We get very humongous figures as budgets. We know climes and countries that use a tenth of that and are so stable and secure. If we must get homegrown solutions, we must challenge our agencies to toe the line after having given them what is required. So it's not just a blank check, go do what you like. No. You're going to get what you want and some, and you're going to give us what we want and some. If you go into the history of countries that went through what we are going through today, it went so bad that at a point they had more proliferation of service chiefs than they did of soldiers dying on the battlefield. That's it. That's it. We must cut the mess out of the situation if we want to grow. These are times that are opportunities for us to grow. But it's not the kind of growth you do by eating food. It's the kind of growth you get when you become a firebrand. So we must ask for results. Results. We must match every expense to results. And if people who cannot drive the results we seek are at the helm of affairs, then we'll have to make the necessary changes. No sentiments, no emotions. Other than that, talking about homegrown solutions, there is never a lack of academic and theoretical solutions, and I have no problem with that. But you must understand something, and the easiest way I can explain it is, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, human needs, you begin to see that there are those basic needs that if you don't meet within the citizenry, the best security architecture. And I also do not like the use of the word architecture. We really do not have an architecture yet, people. We have a security posture, a national security posture, for which we need an architecture, a plan. Because even if there was a plan, I don't think we're seeing it on ground. It's not watering down the value chain of security to what you can call results. The results we're seeing, of course, there are results, but we cannot match the results to the humongous expenses being incurred. So basically what we're going to be doing here as a people, if we really want to grow, is we must track results. And if we want to put a national security plan or architecture on ground, then there are certain basics, human basics, that must be met, or else the best plan will yield naught. And I've mentioned them earlier. Okay? One of them is, look at child security in Nigeria. No nation can ever be greater than its children, people. Let's get that clear. No nation can ever be greater than its children. Now tell me, where will you put the Nigerian child if we were to do a health, an education, and a nutrition analysis index? Yes, that's it. The insurgents, the bandits in the forest, if you took 20 to 25 years out of their lives, what do you think they were 20, 25 years ago? They were itinerant, roaming children begging for food on the streets. So until we pay attention to those basic things and the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you go back to Albert Maslow or so, just go Google it, you see his hierarchy of needs. No country can grow until you start meeting those basic needs, then you go upward. So I support our trying to craft a national security architecture, but then if we are to do that properly, that architecture should also pay very, very close attention to what I call the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Because until you put food in people's stomach, you put roof over their heads, they can sleep and do some basic things that inform the offices of nature, your best security architecture models will not plug these homegrown security problems I've been talking about. So the solutions have to be homegrown, and they have to come from the grain, as I said earlier. We must think in the grain, in the detail. Then you begin to see the kind of picture we want eventually, at the end of the day, come to be.
No, it's not. All right, Captain Ali Umar, thank you very much there for the very useful points that you have raised. I hope we'll have time to return to you to talk about how we can, one of the issues you talked about, cure the allergy to numbers by the security agencies, that they'd also track performance. You've talked extensively about Maslow, that's Abraham Maslow, and his hierarchy of needs, the top of which is self-actualization. Just before we take this short break, let's bring in AIG Felix Obuado. He has one or two comments to make, and then we'll take a short break, return to our tweets, and then get back to our guests.
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to make a few comments on what my colleague to my right said. First and foremost, some of these security outfits, like the vigilante group and the one they called it, the one they can't know is back. All of them nationwide, the police works with them. They reach out to the police once in a while. So I think there's some kind of synergy. There might not be as much as we expect, but the police relates with them. They also get intelligence from them, and so it's going on very well. Then secondly, on the issue of whether they have powers to arrest or not, under our laws, every citizen has the right to effect an arrest, anybody committing an offense. But behoves that person, after effecting the arrest, you must hand over the suspect to the police. That's very important. Then, lastly, people that commit offenses, they know that what they're doing is criminal. Nobody ever commits an offense out of ignorance. You are breaking into somebody's house, you know what you're doing is illegal. You are going to steal somebody's money, no, it's illegal. You've killed somebody, that is criminal. So all we need to do is just this sensitization, let people know their do's and their don'ts and all of that. Yes.
All right,
so that will take us very far.
Yes. We'll stop you there. I want to take a short break. When we come back, I think we'll still have time to do other analysis. But what is important so far said here is the fact that we have appreciated that we really have a problem with security, and that has to be a homegrown solution to address it. This is Good Morning Nigeria on the network service of the NTA. We are taking a short break. When we get back, we'll continue with the program.
Meet the dreamer. Meet the stylish. Meet the bold. Meet the inquisitive. Meet the warrior. Meet the master. Meet the realist. The challenge is coming. Unity Challenge. Power, development, and peace. Coming soon.
Don't you people sell imported materials here? As beautiful as the shop is.
Auntie, buying foreign goods does not help our economy. Neither does it boost local production. And the good thing is Nigerian-made products are high quality. Really? And to make Nigeria great again, that is why I only sell made in Nigeria products. Because change begins with me.
I'm convinced. Change begins with me too.
Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Well, thank you for staying with us. Now, let's go to the tweets that we have received this morning. It's a litany of it coming from Nigerians who are watching and trying to make their own contributions to the conversation. First, we have Festus Akimbo, where he says, I strongly believe that we can only have security across the length and breadth of our country when we have a strong economy that works for all Nigerians. A strong economy will allow us to invest in our national security. Government at all levels must restore our economy to strength.
All right, now Abdul tweets, the citizens must pay attention to what is happening in their environment. We must go back to the old ways of community policing, where information on every member of a community or stranger is readily available to the community leader.
All right, to Comrade Alaji Ngala, government should try and organize National Security Summit and invite all traditional title holders or rulers to the summit because they are very close to the people. Recruiting, that's the end of it.
Law Facil has the next one, I believe.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
All right, recruiting, adequate training and mobilization of security personnel will go a long way in providing solutions to internal security challenges in our country. I'm not an advocate of state police, as governors who display an unquenchable appetite to remain in power will use the force against their perceived political opponents.
Well, Ishak Abdullahi really has 6 points here he made. I'm sure I'm going to go through all of that, but let's start with the first one. Strengthen the law enforcement agencies in the country to checkmate importation of arms, regulate and monitor activities of every foreigners residing in Nigeria. Very good point. Regulate preachers of both religion from planting seeds of discord among the people. Police should be reoriented towards partnering with the general public to curb criminality in the communities. The criminal legal system needs to be changed to suit the peculiarities and the realities of our country.
All right, Kerry, very good points that he you said that he noted. Jones Ferrari has a most independent manipulated.
says it's simple, just build that esprit de corps among the security agencies and promote excellence, not